Is it time to re-gear your Jeep? Well, we've done a ton of them here at Exodus 4x4, and in this video, we're gonna break down what you need to be thinking about when it's time to make the decision. Hey everybody, it's Bo with Exodus 4x4, and we build badass 4x4s. Well, this video is about re-gearing. We made one a couple of years ago, but we really didn't focus with you Jeep guys on what we could do with the JL and the JT because, well, A, the JL was still relatively new, and B, the JT didn't exist yet. Also, there's been a lot of drivetrain options that have come up in the Jeep world. The 2-liter turbo, the diesel, the 392 Wrangler, so let's talk about that. It's not a one-size-fits-all gear ratio and tire combo video anymore. After a couple of years of building these Jeeps and doing a lot of gear jobs on them, we feel like we have a pretty good pulse on what they are. So we're gonna go through some of the stuff in this video that we would recommend, like when you would do a gear change. Basically, anytime that you go from changing the vehicle from stock to modifying it into whatever your dream build is, plan on re-gearing. Whether you're going to be adding larger tires to it, bed rack, a rooftop tent, all these things play a huge role in what gear ratio you should be putting that Jeep to. Now, I can't pretend in a video that I can recommend every single scenario out there. It's impossible. Instead, what I'm going to do is kind of provide some descriptions of what I think you should do. If you don't get your answer here, go read the description and I might have your answers there. You can always post your comments and I'll do my best to address it there also. We talked about reasons why you would re-gear, but what makes this video important? We already made one, but that information was based on the JK, which they no longer produce it, but there's a ton of them running around. We still re-gear them, but it's different. Even though it has the same engine, sort of, it's different. But why? Why? And what it comes down to is the 8-speed automatic transmission. The JK had a 5-speed. With the 8-speed, the gears are actually closer together. And what that means is, as you're cruising down the road and the vehicle decides it's time to shift, it doesn't take as much of a fall from whatever RPM it's at when it shifts into a higher gear. Think of it like a manual transmission. Sometimes if you shift too prematurely, the engine will load up and it'll die. Kind of the same thing, with the 5-speed, it would shift and then would drop a few hundred RPMs. Engine's not operating as efficiently as it was before. It feels underpowered. People complain. They call me. We put him in it. They're happy. But what happened was they went with the 8-speed and they put the gears close together. So when it shifted, you hardly even notice it sometimes. Now, what that did right out the gate was a bunch of people went online and they said,
hey, you don't need to re-gear these things. It's great.
Dude, it blowed up and then ran better.
That wasn't true. People were confused. They didn't know what to do. So they kept driving around like that. When reality was they weren't ever getting out of 6th gear. They were taking the JL, put 37s on it and driving around. And yeah, it still felt powerful, but it wasn't operating at the parameters it was designed to be in, or was it operating efficiently? Even though they were still doing good, they're in 6th gear. I mean, that's got to be hard on that engine and transmission. So we want to get you back into 7th and 8th. So even though the 8-speed's great, or made you feel like it provided a lot of power, it still needs to be re-geared. So let's say you got a JL, it has a Pentastar V6 in it and an 8-speed automatic, and you want to put 35s on it. I strongly recommend 456. It's solid. You're going to go more than that? You want to go 37s? 488. Anything more than 488? Plan on doing 513s. The 2-liter turbo came along. That was different. That's one of the changes since the last video we made. And while it's stronger than the V6, its gasoline counterpart, it isn't so different that I would recommend different ratios. So whatever I recommend for the Pentastar, kind of look over at the 2-liter. The 2-liter, you're gonna run about the same ratios. Now, the real game changer came along with the diesel. The 3-liter Eco Diesel is awesome. 442 foot-pounds of torque. It just goes, man. It's awesome. It's not a racehorse by any means, but it's a good ox. It pulls good. It doesn't increase towing capacity at all, but it's definitely an awesome engine. I wish it had been around years ago. If I didn't have so many other plans going on in my build world, I'd probably buy one and cruise the hell out of it and use it, man. It's awesome. And really, it's the truck that everybody needs. I mean, a Gladiator with that diesel, that's really the truck most people need. It comes with 373 gears. You're gonna run 35s on it, I'd recommend 410s. You're gonna run 37s, I recommend 456s. Anything bigger than that, I would go 488. So let's talk about answering some of the questions that were posted on the original video. Number one, Tire size. That's probably going to be the biggest contributing factor to whether or not you should re-gear. So, for example, Jeep, very easy target here. Most of the time, they're somewhere around a 30-inch tire size. It can vary depending on what model they get. V6 with an 8-speed automatic and 30-inch tire is completely different when you throw a 37-inch tire on it. So you want to make sure you re-gear for it. That's a gas engine. You got a diesel engine, same rules do not apply. Diesels have a lot more torque than the gasoline engines do. So we want to make sure that we're very specific about what drivetrain we have and what tire size combo we're putting on there, whether or not we're putting rooftop tents on, we're pulling a trailer. There's so many different variables. So as you're consulting whoever is going to do your gear work, make sure that you tell them all the details about what you're going to do with this vehicle and how you plan to use it, because that's our number one question anytime somebody emails us and asks us about what gear ratio to do. First thing we do is ask them what tire size and how you plan on using the Jeep or whatever vehicle it is. So be very specific when you're consulting your shop about how you're going to use the vehicle. The next thing, does re-gearing my Jeep mean it's going to go faster? Yes and no. On the highway, not necessarily. You're probably going to top out a lot sooner than you used to. But I mean, we're talking about when you're going 95 or 100 miles an hour, okay? So don't over-gear the Jeep. It's nice to have a little bit extra gear in there, but don't go too high of a ratio because you don't want to be running too high RPMs up in the higher range, like 75, 80 miles an hour on the highway. You want to keep those RPMs right where they should be. Depends on your vehicle. What you're going to gain is a lot of torque. You may not gain speed, but you're going to gain a lot of torque. I guess you gain a little bit of speed when you're taking off from like a stop sign or stoplight or something like that. You know, you're doing wicked cool burnouts in the parking lot in front of your friends while everybody's throwing natty ice at you. That's what we're trying to gain. And another thing is, people like to know, will it affect my horsepower? No, not at all. The things that affect horsepower are weight, mostly. In our off-road vehicles, we care about horsepower unless you're running like a Hellcat or Demon or something like that. We're more concerned about torque, which is what we're going to gain back when we do a re-gear with our larger tires. How or who does the gears? Now, when you start consulting shops about doing your re-gear, there's a few things you want to touch on. Price is going to be one of them. I think a fair price for a Jeep re-gear now, you know, modern Jeeps, let's say a JK is about $1,500. Recently, the prices went up on those. Labor prices are going up. Everything's going up. So it's about $1,600 now for what we charge. I would think it, you know, like a Jeep Wrangler, JK, you're going to be somewhere around the $1,500 to $1,800 range is a pretty fair price. In the JLs and JTs, those parts cost a little more, so they've traditionally always been more expensive. We charge about $1,850 for that, but I think anywhere between the $1,750 to $2,300 range is pretty fair. Anything more than that, and I've heard crazy stories from all over the country. We have people come here from all over want re-gears because local shops to them were charging or quoting 2 to 3 times as much for a re-gear, which is crazy. Just sounds insane that somebody would charge that much for a re-gear. And what I tell everybody is, it sounds like they're building in a warranty process to that gear ratio. They're not super confident in what they're doing. They're probably not very fast at it. Probably takes them a few days. And they think that vehicle could come back with some problems. So they're kind of they're building in a warranty to that thing. So be careful about that. Also, we're in and out in one day on our gear work. Maybe not when we're doing a full-on build that includes gears, but our gear work, if somebody's just getting a re-gear done, it's in and out of here the same day. If the shop isn't very good at it, they're not very efficient at it, it's going to take them a few days just to do a simple gear job. You may want to look around. You may pay more sometimes, a little bit extra than what I charge, but sometimes it's worth it. Another good resource for finding a shop to do this, social media. We're all so well connected nowadays. There's a Facebook page for just about every Jeep group out there in the world. Go hit your local one up, whether it's Jeeps, off-road, whatever. There's groups out there. In fact, I would probably hit around in not just one group. I'd try several pages and ask them for some recommendations. You're probably going to see a common denominator appear all across those from different people, not just the same people. That's probably a shop you want to go to. What should your re-gear include? Ours includes parts and labor calibration of the vehicle. So we plug into the ECU or ECM and we make those changes to make sure that that new gear ratio is in there. Also, post break-in inspection. Very, very important. We include that. We change the fluid. We make sure that there's no contaminants, no major particle, broken pieces in there. That's super important, and it's very, very critical that you follow that 500-mile break-in correctly. So let's talk about that break-in a little bit more. Whoever you choose to do your gear work, they will go over this with you, or they better. And if they don't, you might not want them to do your gears, but we recommend a 500-mile break-in. But more importantly, you want to heat cycle your bearings. Bearing heat cycle is super important. It's probably more critical than the actual ring and pinion break-in. What we recommend for that is drive about 15 miles, stop, let the differentials cool down 100%. It's going to take a few hours, and, unless it's the dead of winter and you're in North Dakota and it's like -30.
Why don't you go eat some tartars, you snail-sucking mime lovers?
Probably going to take you a while. Drive it 15 miles, stop, let those bearings cool down, drive it another 15 miles. You want to do about 4 or 5 heat cycles before you go full on trying to break in your gears. And I highly recommend, I tell all my customers, try not to go over 65 anytime during that 500-mile break-in. It's important that we follow that. You don't want to overheat those gears during that time. And while all that stuff is trying to get, it's very tight first time you drive it, which is going to cause more friction and heat in the oil. It's going to break down. You could lose a lot of viscosity in your oil if you go too hard on them at first, and then you're going to burn up your bearings, and your gears ultimately are going to get trashed. So follow that break-in, guys. It's super important. Fluid. Does it matter? Not during the break-in. We're just looking for high-poi gear oil, GL5. It does not need to be a synthetic unless you're running something like an ARB air locker in there that is sensitive. O-rings are kind of sensitive to different additives in the oils. So we always run just house brand from like O'Reilly's or AutoZone. It's excellent oil. Don't get me wrong. Just because it doesn't have a big fancy name on it doesn't mean it's not a great oil. It is. In fact, that's what I run in all my diffs, is just the house brand oil. Viscosity is going to depend on where you're at. I won't go into that, but consult your local shop whenever they're doing the gears, and they'll tell you what gear oil they use for break-in, what they recommend for your area. So it's not one size fits all. Definitely pay attention to that and talk to your shop about it. Oh, and you guys with, like say you have a front axle that's not live, like the JL and JT that have fat, you're going to want to make sure you throw that thing in 4 high every now and then when you're driving on straightaways to make sure that that front axle gets a little bit of break-in time. Talk to your shop about that. Make sure that they're recommending you do that. They should be able to tell you the best times to do that and when not to do it. So make sure you guys talking to them about that. That pretty much covers it. For more videos on off-roading and other off-road tech, click right here.